Today we're going to take a look at SharpCloud for PI Planning. This application is meant to enhance your planning experience by taking what is often done with sticky notes on a whiteboard or a virtual whiteboard and turning those sticky notes into dynamic, data-driven items, allowing for us to make better and more informed decisions. Today we're going to be seeing the application through the lens of a release train engineer, but we could also stand this application up for individual teams. So let's get started. First, if we're talking about data, we can bring that in from other tools such as Jira, as seen here, or we could add all of the story items right from within the tool itself. As we move through our first initial steps, you'll notice forms on the right-hand side, which allow for easy data entry, and I'll demonstrate those at various points. So, as we would start our PI planning session, the first step we've outlined is to set our team capacity. So I could look potentially at all of our teams, or as I said, we could stand this up from a team perspective where I could start to manage my capacity across our various iterations. And again, you can see here on the right is that form that I mentioned where we could even add or update our team capacity for this iteration. Now, the next thing we're going to do is start to define those user stories. So what I'm able to do is if I was looking at all of my teams here, or even just one team, I would be able to maybe filter by story type to see, well, what enabler stories do we have? And on the right-hand side here, I could use a form to populate and add more story items and see what team they may go to and even what feature they may relate to. Now, once we define our user stories and we've set our capacity, the next thing that we're going to want to do is actually look at our story points. So we can set these story points in a variety of ways. One would be that I could actually just drag and drop to change the story point value. Or we could use the form here on the right to make those updates. So as I shift this to 13, we'll see story 24 moved. Now, the last way that we can do this is actually maybe play some planning poker. So we could send out this QR code, people could be sharing the screen or give them a link, and they would be able to vote. Now, this is just to ensure that everyone of any member of the team, their voice is being represented here. So we could see Jason gave us a 20, Matei gave us an 8. Well, maybe we're going to meet in the middle and call this a 13. And we could even explore some of those other story attributes here, such as when this is going to start, its status, and priority. So we can get a quick overview. Now, the next couple views that we see are where the data-driven aspects are really going to come together. So on step 4 here, as we look to balance our load across our various iterations against our capacity, we're going to want to make some changes. So let's say, for example, we come in and we look at team 2, and team 2, we can see a few things happening here. One of which is the items are sized by their story points, so we can see which items are going to take up more time potentially, as well as a border color here where we can see what sprints or iterations here are overloaded. So I can see in iteration 1.3, we have a total load of 21, but our capacity for this iteration is only 20. So we need to make some adjustments. So if I take story 8, for example, and shift it to 1.4, we'll notice everything is completely balanced as we see no more red. The border colors are back to green. So from a team level, we would want to make that apparent. And from the RTE level, they'd be able to look at all of their teams and see where they need focus by being able to quickly look at just those red items. We could also see this on the view itself by just filtering on saying, well, where are we over capacity? And I can quickly see those two sprints across all of our teams. Now, as we start to move our items between different iterations, the question always comes up, well, what happens with our dependencies? If I look at our next view here, we can start to see that. And this is one way to manage it, where the relationship thickness here is going to tell us that we're out of order. So if I move 28 from 1.1 to 1.3, so it's after story 19, we could see that line goes back to a very standard relationship line, meaning we've satisfied that dependency out of order situation. Now, to manage this, we could do it separately as we just did. Potentially, we want to look at that side by side where I see my dependency and load at the same time so I can actually see what's happening. So, should I move story 28 to 1.3? We'll see that move here. And luckily, we didn't see anything shift red, meaning that what we've done over here, we're completely satisfied. And I can even see that this item has two people working in it right now, which is great. So we're getting that extra insight. We could also potentially do that activity we just did in the same view where I'm seeing the coloring and the relationship at once. Because we are a platform, we're not going to tell you how you have to work. We want our application to work for you. So as you're working here, all we would want is a little input to say, how can we enhance this and even personalize it even more for you? Now that we've went through, we've balanced our load, we can start to look at other aspects that may be applicable to your PI planning session. That might be managing the risks across the program or certain teams. We can see if the risk has an owner or not. So I can see this risk 4 for team 3 does not have an owner because this is a blank symbol up here where it's just showing white. So there's no owner. Whereas these items like team 1 risk 3 does have an owner. This is Mate as to why this is green. Again, I could open up this risk. I could see what story it even is impacting and learn about the risk attributes and properties here. Outside of managing our risks, we could look at things like the confidence vote and the retrospective, where I could maybe look at my confidence vote and say, well, who scored this poorly? Okay, I can see Dan gave it a 2. Maybe I want to reach out to Dan, have a conversation as to why he felt that way, and maybe even reach out to our 5, so David, Jason, and Jess, and say, hey, I'm really happy that you feel confident. What went well this session? And if they don't want to tell me in person, we can have that retrospective come in right here, where someone might say, um, really like this session, and say it went well. That could be the feedback, hit submit, and we would see that come into focus on our view right away. So we could start to send this out. We could send these forms out in the retrospective confidence vote via a link or even a QR code dedicated to the form. So we can really start to get that feedback on our session. Now, this was a very quick look at our SharpCloud for PI planning as an application. Should you have any questions or sales inquiries,